and I will keep an eye on my emails for passwords in the meantime. Are you ready to get started? Yes, great. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody, for this demonstration in reality of virtual grace. You all passed the test and got the password to get into the session, so I appreciate that. And thank you so much to John Dewees and Dominic Byrd-McDevitt for being here today. Anybody who's not here obviously is not hearing me say this, but the recording will be posted online, so hopefully you're watching it now if you weren't able to get in. Dominic Byrd-McDevitt is DPLA's Data Fellow. Dominic is working to integrate DPLA's collections into Wikimedia projects and make them more readily accessible and reusable online. Most recently, Dominic worked at the National Archives and Records Administration, where he was a digital content specialist, helping to design the catalog's crowdsourcing features and launch the agency's first catalog API, as well as being the world's longest serving Wikipedian in residence. Dominic also served as Wikipedian in residence at the Smithsonian Institution. Dominic currently serves as a cultural partnerships advisor at Wikimedia District of Columbia and has been an active Wikipedia editor since 2004. He has a BA from Reed College and has studied library science at Simmons College. John Dewees is the supervisor of digitization services at the Toledo Lucas County Public Library and project manager for digitization and digital projects. Prior to coming to Toledo, John worked in the circulation department of Thompson Library at the Ohio State University. He has been responsible for the first harvest of TLCPL's records into DPLA, collaborating to build data visualizations utilizing content DM records, digital library creation based around an extensive collection of architectural records, and most recently, partnering to duplicate repository records into Wikimedia Commons using DPLA and then enriching Wikipedia articles for greater reach and access. John and Dominic are our speakers today for where they're at, enriching the Wikiverse with DPLA. And with that, I will go ahead and hand the session over to them. Thanks, guys.
Great, thanks so much, Jen. As Jen said, my name is Dominic. I'm here to share an exciting project that DPLA is embarking on just since the beginning of 2020. And just to kind of whet your appetite, I'll start out with a little factoid, which is that annually on Wikipedia, digital collections from cultural institutions receive 10 billion views. So our project that we're going to be talking about, the idea behind what DPLA is working on is quite simply to tap into that viewership. The goal of this session is to give you all a case study specifically from Ohio with a practical guide for how to get started with DPLA's Wikimedia project. And you'll be hearing about the project not just from DPLA, but from the perspective of a fellow ODN institution, which has been participating for the last few months. I'm really excited and glad to have John as a co-presenter today, who I'm sure many of you are already familiar with. John's work has made the library the most successful DPLA institution on Wikipedia so far with this project. So I'm really excited to have him share with you in a few minutes what they've been able to accomplish and what he's been working on and what it took. So I just want to spend the next few minutes setting the stage for you and giving an overview for the totality of the project. So I'm going to start very broad with the overview and first talk kind of about the idea of the project and what we're trying to accomplish. So DPLA's mission is that DPLA empowers people to learn, grow, and contribute to a diverse and better functioning society by maximizing access to our shared history, culture, and knowledge. So there's really two kind of main goals of our Wikimedia project. the overarching primary goal is this access mission goal for DPLA. So I've been really gratified that what we're working on is not just a pilot or experiment. It's really gets at the heart of what DPLA does and what DPLA is offering to its members, which is increasing access and generating more usage for our collections. The other thing that's important here is the Wikimedia aspect of this project. So you may have seen this statement before, like in fundraising banners on Wikipedia. Imagine a world in which every single human being can freely share in the sum of all knowledge. Just to pull back the curtain a little bit, if you're not as familiar with how Wikipedia works, Wikipedia is run by a nonprofit foundation, the Wikimedia Foundation. This statement is taken from their vision. And there's a lot of mission alignment between the two organizations of Wikimedia and DPLA and the library profession and field as a whole. So we're interested in working with Wikipedia as a platform because of the visibility there, but there's also a lot of alignment in the things that we're doing and just the dissemination of information in society. So those are both two important things. In terms of the project itself, this is a Sloan-founded grant project that began in the beginning of the year, or I joined DPLA just in December of last year. So everything that we've done has just started from scratch since then. And the idea behind this project is all about getting materials used and viewed. But in terms of the specifics, this is kind of a flow chart that I've developed to kind of describe what we're actually talking about in terms of the technical aspect of the architecture of the project. So the idea is that DPLA, is already performing aggregation of cultural heritage metadata from over 4,000 contributing institutions. So as this kind of central organization, DPLA is well positioned to bring assets, bring digitized collections into Wikipedia. This is how it works in practice. DPLA has the metadata that is aggregated. By taking those in combination with the digital assets that cultural institutions host, we can upload those materials to Wikimedia Commons, which is the file repository for all of the Wikimedia projects, including Wikipedia. And then from there, images that have been uploaded or any types of assets that have been uploaded to Wikimedia Commons can then be used in Wikipedia. So the upload to Wikimedia Commons is what enables them to be added to a Wikipedia article. And that's where the actual views and usage come in. This is kind of the basic requirements. This isn't necessarily knowledge that everyone here even needs to know. If there's anyone here tuning in or watching the recording in the future from outside of the Ohio Digital Network especially, this is relevant. But the idea is in order for something to be, for DPLA to be able to actually put something into Wikimedia Commons, aside from the basic requirements for any record to be ingested into DPLA, the main things that we require are a standardized right statement, which ODN already all records meet, of a valid or of a compatible rights status. So Wikimedia Commons and all Wikimedia projects, including Wikipedia, are open access only. And so we're only uploading materials that are using the no copyright in the United States right statement, which is the reason that we need right statements, so we can filter on rights in a machine readable way. For other partners, we also are able to upload things that are in under an open copyright, Creative Commons copyright license, like public domain mark CC0, CC by SA. And then the other thing is that we need access to the actual location of the media. So in this example from Texas, Texas is providing AAAF manifests for all of their items. And so that means that if we want to do an upload, we can actually query the AAAF manifest to get a listing of all of the assets that are associated with a given item. So that's a basic requirement because we can have all the data we want, but we need to be able to get the asset itself to upload. And we're working closely with all of the folks at ODN to get this data from Ohio. So I'm not going to go into too much specifics about that. Just to give you some highlights of the project to date of what we've accomplished. DPLA already has done over 700,000 uploads to Wikimedia Commons, most of that taking place in the spring. It's the largest single upload from any cultural institution to Wikimedia Commons already. As a result of this project, DPLA now has over 50% of the items in our aggregation with standardized rights statements or Creative Commons licenses. And 6 hubs are now providing media location data, like AAAF manifests. And a lot of these changes and increases in coverage of these data fields is because of institutions that are wanting to participate in the Wikimedia project. The other thing I'll share is that we've implemented changes to the DPLA analytics dashboard, and we're developing a new pipeline, which is different from some of the uploads we did earlier in the spring, in which uploads to Wikimedia will actually be part of the regular sort of ingestion and synchronization workflow that DPLA has. So just to kind of share that specific example about the analytics dashboard, we are now providing hubs with access to data around the compatibility, or what we say readiness, for Wikimedia for the items that they're contributing. So this example from Texas again, because they have 100% items with AAAF manifests, URLs provided, and 21% that have rights statements that are compatible, then 21% in total of their items are considered ready for upload to Wikimedia Commons. Before I hand it off to John to talk about more specifics, I'll just say a couple more things about the project. And the main thing I want to say is that this pipeline that I'm talking about of getting assets into Wikimedia Commons is not itself the project. I think of it more as the prerequisite, because the goal of the project from DPLA's perspective is to get images into Wikipedia articles, which is where the page views are and how we're going to generate usage. That's not a technical project, that's an editorial project, the actual addition of the images to Wikipedia, and John's going to talk about that process. So because of that, really the success of this project is going to be measured in how much participation we get from all of the individual institutions across the DPLA network. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to John to talk specifically about just that.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, kind of just picking up the conversation to what advantages you can reap from doing this kind of work. We successfully ingested, I think around, you can see here, 129,632 images from our local digital content DM collections. At Toledo, we are an Ohio Memory contributor, and we have 4 collections that we contribute, 2 of those which are harvested by DPLA. So here you can see everything that we have moved from Content DM through DPLA and now copied into Wikimedia Commons. And we'll kind of walk through exactly how this process goes from every step of the road. So first of all, as an example, we're going to go through the literal process that I go through to embed images into Wikipedia articles, and we're going to do it totally live with hopefully no problems, knock on wood. And you know, these are going to be real live examples that are then going to go into my stats and my reporting and are going to hopefully be seen by all sorts of people across Wikipedia viewers. So we've got 2 images that we're going to be using that come from a large postcard collection that we uploaded last year. If you've been doing a HioDig meeting, you've kind of heard me drone on about this for probably over a year. And just to kind of reflect those technical requirements that are needed to make this a good candidate, we see here that we have a III manifest link that we expose, as well as our IIIF image link, and that we also have the rights URI statement. So we can see this is a good candidate for inclusion in Wikimedia Commons because it has the 2 technical prerequisites. And we can also see this is a complex object. This is a postcard, so it has a front image and a back image. So this is then how it appears in DPLA for all DPLA contributors and users. I'm sure this all looks very familiar and all of the metadata that gets ported over to it. But now, most importantly, this is what it looks like in Wikimedia Commons. So as we can see, and also as we were able to tell from the kind of the large scale view of all of the resources we've collected here, compound objects get broken out into 2 simple objects. So this, for instance, is 2 sides of the same postcard that would be kind of like intellectually linked in our Content DM instance, but then get broken apart once you have them into Wikimedia Commons, which has just kind of provides, it's neither good nor bad necessarily, just something to know and something to keep in mind as you're trying to interact with these resources. So if we get back here into our Wikimedia Commons view of this, we can see that the file name for this is the title of the record, Ursuline Convent, Toledo, Ohio, DPLA, or Toledo, Ohio. And then in the center here, we have DPLA showing where the record originated. Here we have the DPLA identifier that is created upon harvest, which is a very long series of letters and numbers that identifies this resource uniquely. And then we have the page 1 over here to reflect that this is the first image of that compound object. Scrolling down, this is the metadata view for the record. And one thing I know, I may have even talked to some of you all over this summer about this process, about our experience with this process. And I know one thing that came up of concern for a lot of libraries is making sure that there was robust attribution for records. So this source photographer field, as well as some of this very familiar metadata that has been migrated from our record. But the source photography field kind of provides an overview of the project here, as well as links back to the Wikipedia articles for both my organization and DPLA in general. As well as links back to my record in Content DM, and again, that DPLA identifier and the record in DPLA. So there's lots and lots of attribution that is going here. It really provides a great deal of context for this image, which is kind of wonderful. So now we have this thumbnail view and a file history, which is going to change here in a minute. So the editorial part that Dominic was talking about can be kind of interesting, since this is very much more art than science, this process. I have a saved search of all copyright-free resources in our primary Content DM collection, and I just sort of kind of sort that alphabetically and then kind of just page through that content, just sort of looking for inspiration, for lack of a better term. It makes this kind of interesting work and a little bit more creative work, because there's no straightforward answer necessarily for where these images should necessarily go. If you have programming backend and kind of want to try and automate this process, I'm sure you could try and do some keyword matching between resources in Wikimedia Commons and Wikipedia, but that is not how I do it, and certainly not necessarily. Certainly not necessary. So for instance, we have this image that I came across for the Ursuline Convent and that was previously in Toledo. So I said, well, is there an article for the Ursuline Nuns? And as it turns out, yes, there very much is an article for the Ursuline Nuns. So this seems like it could potentially be a good candidate for inclusion. So as we scroll down, we see some more of the content from the article as well as some images. And now we have this here secondary education that lists already another Ursuline convent, this time in Dallas, Texas. So why shouldn't our Toledo convent also be included in that section to provide some additional context? So going back to our image, one of the nice things too about having these resources in Wikimedia Commons is there's a tool once you have an account with Wikipedia and Wikimedia, a tool that you can add to your account that allows you to make crops of images on the fly. So you can do a little bit of image editing in Wikimedia without ever touching your resource in its home location in your local repository, or how it's displayed in DPLA for that matter. So this postcard, we don't necessarily want the Ursuline Convent, Toledo, Ohio here to show up because we'll go ahead and put that in the caption. So we can crop this image and crop tool loads. And again, it's just a very simple tool, just provides a crop box that maybe we can kind of focus in on this building a little bit more and make it a little bit more prominent in the image. So then we can preview this. And that looks beautiful. We'll love that in the Wikipedia article. And then you have the option to overwrite or upload as a new file. We always want to upload this as a new file. We never want to kind of erase previous content. So we upload this image and review the result. So now between Ohio Memory Content DM, DPLA, and now 2 instances of Wikimedia Commons, we have 4 instances of this kind of interrelated record that are kind of spanning these different platforms. So one of the nice things about this having this identifier is that you're able to search for it in Wikipedia when you're trying to embed that image. One thing I realized is the only problem, and this is something I didn't think about while preparing this example, was that when you create a cropped version of an image, it can take some amount of time to kind of index in Wikipedia and for Wikipedia to be able to find it. So it won't probably show up right away, but we're going to give it a try and just see if it wants to. And also, sorry, I am in full screen view. So if question or anything, feel free, other presenters, to kind of chime in. So we are going to edit this article. And importantly, we have 2 edit modes for this. This is kind of just sort of what you might hear as a Wysiwyg editor. What you see is what you get. A very common way to to kind of edit HTML text online that I'm sure most folks are familiar with. So we could hypothetically move down here and say we want this in the secondary education section. So we'll just kind of highlight our cursor there and say insert images and media. So this is the part that takes a little bit usually, is to kind of get this search queue cleared out. And you can see some other images that that I've added to various articles. So we're going to try and search for this image, and it doesn't want to do it right away. I'm going to try and search for it again. And yeah, it does not want to return it right now. So we'll use that example for the other one. So right now we're instead the other option is you can source what's called source editing. This provides kind of more of the codified HTML-y kind of background view for the image or for the Wikipedia article. So instead, we can take this entire long file name, go back to our article, find the section on secondary education here, where we can also see that Ursuline Convent, Dallas, Texas image, and say we just want to put it right below it. So we enter in the file name there. We indicate we want this to be a thumbnail. And we indicate we want it to be on the right-hand side of the page. And we want to caption this image. And then 2 closing brackets to indicate that this is an image. And then always we add a little bit of information on why exactly we're editing this page. As you can see, most of my examples are added historical image of whatever the article is, of a convent, a Ursuline convent in Toledo, Ohio. And one of the nice things is you can always show a preview of what this is going to look like. So as we scroll down, we can see that this has kind of situated itself just where we thought it was going to, nicely lining up with the image that was above it. So then we can say publish changes. And this is the now the publicly facing view for this article with our image now embedded inside of it. So, and that is really kind of the length and breadth of how this process works and how it functions. Really the kind of the hardest part, so to speak, is really just kind of finding the articles and making sure that you've got good candidates to add images to. The actual process of kind of pulling the image out of Wikimedia Commons and getting it into a Wikipedia article is very fast and straightforward. So that was one example. And I saw that there was some stuff coming up in the chat. Now, of course, I can't seem to find in the full screen view. So anyways, so a second example where we're going to try and use the visual editor instead of that source editor. So here is an example of a post office in West Toledo. So again, has that no copyright US rights statement, has the TLCPL image manifest link. We see this in DPLA. And now, again, we see same sort of view, all the constituent parts in Wikimedia Commons. And since we're not going to edit this image, we are just going to go ahead and grab this DPLA identifier to very generically edit the sorry, and for anybody that has asked questions, we'll make sure to go back and get everything answered, Emily, so don't you worry. So anyways, so here we have just the article on post offices very generically. So it is almost a little bit shorter than I might have expected, but lots of images, some text, and we, why shouldn't the West Toledo post office be also represented here? So here we can go back into the edit view, but instead we're going to go back to the visual editing. So we have a good representation. And there, when in the live view of this, there was some nice white space available below this post office building in Edinburgh. So why shouldn't our image also be included there? So I'm guessing that was probably this image is in the source view, probably right at the top of the article. So we're going to set our cursor here at the beginning of the article and say insert images and media, and then do a search for that DPLA identifier. And this time everything works correctly because we don't have to wait for it to get indexed. And here is the image that we wanted to see. As well as you can see it pulls up everything for a complex digital object, it pulls up everything that has that identifier. So we also have the back here, which looks like some just kind of hilariously delightful handwriting. So here we select the image. We say, use this image. Here we can also kind of get that information that we included in the source view. So we say we want a thumbnail, we want it on the right side, we want it just to be the default size for a thumbnail. And then we can also provide some caption text. So West Toledo Branch Post Office, Toledo, Ohio. And if I go all the way back, we can see that this dates to from 1912. So we can include that as well. And then also include that as alt text. And then hit insert. And now we can see where exactly it is putting it. And luckily, it is putting it exactly where we hoped it was going to land, which I will say is one of the reasons that I kind of really like the source view. I started off only using this visual editor just because it's simpler, it's easier, it's something that you've interacted, it's the sort of interface that you've interacted with many times before in the past. The source view, the nice thing about it is it allows you to provide a little bit more precision. You can kind of pick exactly where in the article you want this to be sort of intellectually connected to and make sure it ends up there. But really, it's a matter of preference. There's no hard and fast rule about using one or the other. It's just whatever you're most comfortable with. So then we say we want to publish these changes. And of course, again, they want, Wikipedia requires a reason of why you're engaging with this edit. So we say added additional historical example of a post. And of course, I can never type when there's an audience of a post office in Toledo, Ohio in the early 20th century. And we say we want to publish these changes. And then once again, we see that that image ended up exactly where we wanted to. So aside from just kind of this work as well, just some kind of, I don't have slides for this, but just some closing thoughts and comments. One of the big reasons, there's a few great reasons to do this. Something that occurred to me earlier today is, especially in sort of that answer to, well, you know, who needs libraries anymore? Everything's just online. Everybody just uses Google. Well, a lot of times a Google search leads to Wikipedia. So now we're also kind of like meeting them where they're at in that regard and heading them off at the pass, so to speak. The other big reason is just the usage statistics. Because I can say we've been doing this between May of this year, you know, kind of the first height of the pandemic, to currently. This is ongoing work that I do for about an hour a week at the end of the week. It's nice to end with a fun project. So while my first like 14-ish articles or so that I enriched in May ended up with over 28,000 page views, 28,000 real human beings looked at those pages and saw those images that I embedded. By September, that had grown to about 124 articles and a little over 200 images, because some of these articles all use more than one image in it. And that got over 1 million page views. So just fantastic usage statistics and a great way to really share your resources with a much wider audience. So, and those are great statistics, both just to feel like you're having an impact in the community, and I think will be very impactful for your administration if you want to be making the case for why your organization should be a DPLA contributor. The other flip side of this that Dominic made a point of really stressing when we were talking about it is, combined over 5 months, this is 20 hours of work, not even a full work week, because it's just an hour a week. The kind of the lift to get that million page views, now over 2 million over the 5-month span, is just an hour a week. Which I know this sounds like an infomercial or something, but it's a very low barrier for entry to get a very high impact. It's great work for volunteers. It's great work for interns. Once the materials are in Wikimedia Commons, this makes great work from home work, because all you need is an internet connection. A lot of times I end up doing this work, again, because the process of pulling something that I've identified in my local repository and getting into the Wikipedia article only takes a handful of minutes. Exactly, Evan. Is very quick. It's great reference desk work, that sort of thing. It's, you know, this is the sort of task you can bounce between other duties and back to this. So I I get very excitable and animated about this because this just seems like the perfect storm, in my opinion, of why we do this work and why we make these resources easily shareable to provide these kind of robust interconnections and to get these materials where people are actually going to be looking at them. So anyway, so that is my bit. And also for anyone that is interested, I've already done this with some folks. If you kind of want more information or want another walkthrough, I'm always here to be a resource for anyone in the community. So anyways, that's my bit. So now we can answer questions, as it looked like there was quite a bit going on in the chat.
Yeah, we've got some questions for you. Thank you so much, Dominic, and thanks, John. And for anybody, excuse me, who doesn't have the chat pulled up, Dominic did bring up a point. Did you want to say that out loud, Dominic, for the automatic uploads too?
Sure, yeah, I'll just reiterate. I think I may have gone over it fast, but basically the main technical work that DPLA is doing for this project is developing a single pipeline for all of the contributors to DPLA so that the technical work of moving assets and metadata to Wikimedia Commons is automated and done by DPLA as essentially an offshoot of the regular harvesting and ingestion that DPLA does from its hubs. So from the standpoint of any participating cultural institution or staff person, the idea is that once you start working on the project, all of the assets have already been uploaded for you, and the role of the institution is just to take care of the editorial process that John was showing. So that's why he kind of started at the point where things are already uploaded.
Excellent. All right. Well, if this is an infomercial, it's certainly the most informative infomercial I've ever attended. So we did have a couple questions come through. Let me pull these up now. And again, if anybody else has anything, go ahead and throw them in the chat there in the Q&A panel. Anna Marie did ask, and I think this was addressed in the chat, but Anna Marie asked if the DPLA identifier is a checksum.
Yeah, and I was just saying, I mean, I'm not the expert on this, but I don't know what the exact parameters are for the ID generation, but I think it's just random characters.
Okay, great. And Emily wanted to know if John could backtrack and show how you uploaded the image to Wikimedia Commons where you have everything you've already loaded. And I think we just covered that with the automatically being added. Emily, does that answer your question, you think? Or lead to another question?
Yeah, assuming that's what we were just addressing.
Great, okay.
And
okay.
I just to throw in there, there's nothing stopping you from kind of doing this process manually and adding your resources to Wikimedia Commons manually if you're not able to contribute to DPLA currently. And kind of the usage statistics seem very exciting to you. It's a way easier to do it through the pipeline, though. It'll save you a whole lot of steps and make sure that everything kind of stays synchronized in a way that otherwise wouldn't be possible.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And spurn from that, if that is happening via OAI PMH and the harvest, the upload process, and the OAI harvest of content DM do not by default transmit data for compound pages, how do the individual pages of the postcard appear in Wikimedia Commons?
So, go ahead, Dominic.
Yeah, so I will just say it's probably not worthwhile to get into like all of the technical questions, but essentially what we've discovered is that the transmission of the media location from the partner to DPLA is kind of the main technical or data work that's required for the hubs. And kind of the main thing that we've learned, I think, that we didn't know going into this project with it was like all the different ways that there might be challenges with that. So especially there's things that are just institutions on many different platforms, and specifically with Content DM, which is I think probably the most common platform across all of DPLA for contributing institutions. It has its own quirks. So the goal is for every institution to be able to provide a IIIF manifest. If you're in Content DM, all of your items should, or if you have visual materials, they're being displayed in IIIF already by OCLC. How we get to there is still kind of something that we're working on all the specifics, and compound objects are one of the kind of difficulties. I don't know if any of the ODN folks want to jump in and be put on the spot, but essentially, like, we're that you're identifying a problem that we are still actively working on, I would say.
An opportunity for learning, right?
Yeah.
Joanne asks also where that III manifest number comes from, and if the institution needs to add that. So that kind of follows along with, it's not necessarily something that you manually add, like a title or subject.
Right.
Yeah, so our harvest of records into Wikimedia Commons happened before we even included the III manifests links in our publicly facing views. Those were already in existence. Content DM automatically generates them, but they can be useful to researchers, so we also make them available publicly in our records, which was just something Ohio Memory did for us on the back end. And big shout out to Ohio Memory and the great staff there.
Shout out to Phil.
Pretty much.
Excuse me, everybody else at Ohio Memory.
And I'll just say there's kind of two different things when you're talking about the IIIF manifest URL, which is you can implement that in whatever way in your metadata on the institution's end, but the part of the challenge is also providing it to DPLA, mapping it to a separate field and getting it into DPLA's ingested metadata. So for any other hubs maybe that are listening, it's more than just the single step of getting it into the original host institution's data as well.
And that's something that ODN technical staff has been working on lately too, if anybody is wondering about that. Comment from Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but the public can see this view we are seeing right now of John's quote unquote landing page. And I think that is the page with the Toledo Lucas County Public Library collection on Wikimedia Commons, right? So that's public, right, John or Dominic?
Yeah, so basically this is how information or assets are organized in Wikimedia Commons as a repository. Is just when we do the upload, when DPLA does the upload, there will be a category like this created for the individual institution. And in theory, so like there's 100,000+ assets that have been uploaded here, and John has used 200 of them in articles, right? So most of them are not going to go in articles, and most of the usage is coming out of a small number. So in theory, there may be other benefits to sharing images to Wikimedia Commons beyond just putting them in Wikipedia, because as you're seeing, this is a public page. So someone on the web searching for an image could find it here, or this is, Wikimedia Commons is its own project separate from Wikipedia. So yes, people can go to that page, and that's a public page. And any other Wikipedia editor that's not a staff member could still use those images and put them in Wikipedia articles they're writing on their own too. So there's some hope that there will be some like kind of serendipitous uses alongside like the proactive uses that the institutions will be adding.
Part of the beauty of the whole, Wikimedia universe and spheres, that anybody could go in and do that if they're doing an edit-a-thon or just on their own. And I see John is addressing Emily's question right here about how he gets the statistics, the stats on how many times the images are viewed, pulling up the page here and pulling that data. John, do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and honestly, Dominic knows more about this than I do, but there are open source tracking tools for using the Wikimedia and Wikipedia APIs to kind of get that usage statistics. So we can see it is October 13th, and so far this month we have our resources have already received over 500,000 file views, which is super exciting. And we have now 141 Wikipedia pages using 248 files, 248 individual images, generating all those file views. And the other thing I will say is that this is on 5 separate wikis. I only edit the English Wikipedia, but those in other languages, apparently folks in other languages have decided our resources were worth using as well. This being another one of the big advantages to having materials in Wikimedia Commons is then anybody can use them for any purpose and do this work passively for you without you ever even realizing that you were that those resources were being used in that way. And just one other comment, if I can find it, but to kind of to show that that landing page view that we had used before. So the postcards, it's a pretty simple example of how a complex object gets split up, but for books it does get messier. So this is, for instance, like a 300-page appointment diary, or probably more like 365-page appointment diary. And you can see it gets kind of messy on messy. So here's page 1, page 10, page 100, page 101. So because these don't have leading zeros in them, the sort gets strange too. So I will say that when I'm doing this work, I usually have lots of tabs open. So I'll have my local content DM instance, DPLA, usually a couple of tabs for Wikimedia and a couple of tabs for Wikipedia. So the different platforms will kind of lend themselves to this work in different ways. And especially you who know your content better than anyone, because you're maintaining and uploading and adding that materials, it can be useful to say, oh, I really need my local organizational structure for my record. So I'm going to look at my instance locally, or I need that identifier. So let me pop into DPLA real quick so I can pull that out. So kind of being able to float around in your web browser a lot is helpful, because this is not necessarily a super useful view, but seeing it in maybe your local content DM instance will be able to be a lot more useful to you.
Yeah, I'll say in terms of the first question about the views, we are still actively developing the analytics dashboard that I showed you, and we'll be adding not just the eligibility data, but also the actual analytics page, the page view analytics to that tool. And all of the hubs can manage their own access to the dashboard however they want. So the idea is you might either get a report or get an actual account from Jen or someone within the hub if you're participating in the project and need access to that data. And we're essentially going to be the same tools that John is showing is where we will source it, but the idea is to bring it together into one more easily kind of readable dashboard for you. That part has not been completed yet, the project. Also, just what John was showing at the end with the category page, I'll just point out that Wikimedia Commons is not really the ideal CMS. It's not like equivalent to what you might be used to. And really it's because it's the same software as Wikipedia, just repurposed for a file repository. So all of that, like the actual metadata you're seeing below the image when John showed that, is actually just like templated plain text wiki code. So what I would say also, just to add on, because I don't know if we said this really clearly, but for any institution that's interested in working on this project, DPLA is, and by which I mean Dominic, is happy to meet with you, personally, or with the individual institution, and kind of talk through all the like tips and tricks as well, just like John was going through, and talk about the best ways to find an image that you want to use, or all those sorts of things, and just navigating kind of the interface of Wikimedia Commons and Wikipedia and other kind of tactics like that.
And excuse me, Dominic, your insight and your support has really been valuable. I can say personally to ODN staff and obviously John too, so we can vouch for you.
Thank you.
Very much so.
Absolutely. Let's see. I don't know if we have any other questions coming in here, but if anybody else thinks of anything, we'll keep an eye on the chat for a moment. For those of you who have looked over our agenda for today, our session after lunch is basically a hands-on activity of what you just saw John do in real time, self-led. Depending on how many people attend the session, we might do breakout groups and put people together to kind of collaborate, or you can work on your own to see what's available out there. If you do already have a Wikipedia account, if you registered to edit a Wikipedia article, it's a single sign-on and you can use it anywhere on any of the wiki platforms and projects. So if you would like to actually get it and make live changes, it doesn't matter if your collection's on there. Maybe you could use John's or not John's, Toledo Lucas County Public Libraries, or something
My images,
right? or really any of the images available on Wikimedia Commons, or any articles that you find on Wikipedia. You can make live edits if you'd like to, or just poke around and see what's out there. Sometimes when I'm excited about a project, it's hard for me to block off time to really focus on it. And we thought that being able to do that right after hearing from Dominic and John would be a good opportunity. I'll have some slides with some recommended tabs. It's so funny that you said that, John. Recommended tabs to have open while you're working on the process. And over lunch, we will be checking the rest of the links to make sure that all the sessions are accessible. And thank you, Dominic, for reminding me. There is an upcoming virtual brown bag session from DPLA about discoverability on Thursday, November 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And there is a bit.ly link to register in the chat if you're interested in that. Also, it's on the DPLA site probably, but the bit.ly is easier to remember if you can see that right in front of you right now. And before we sign off for lunch, I also just did want to add, this is not necessarily related at all to Wikimedia Commons, but we did have some laments from attendees that they would not have a badge to hang on, a name badge to hang on their bulletin board. So we did go ahead and make some fillable form ODN Fest badges. If you have a printer and you would like to make your own, feel free. No extra charge for that. But thank you again so much to John and to Dominic and the work of DPLA, your team there in digital collections, John, also to make this happen and to talk about the work. And again, lunch starts at 12:15 and we will meet back here at 1 for our breakout activity session, 45 minutes long. If you're unable to make that breakout activity session, that's okay. We'll see you at 2 p.m. for Shawnee Yvette Moraine and Audrey Altman talking about DPLA's Black Women's Suffrage Collection, a really fantastic project that the staff at DPLA have been working on that I'm excited to see more about today. And I don't see any more questions coming in. Let me check the Q&A. Nope, looks like we're good to go. Thank you, everybody. Have a great lunch.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.